On May the 25th, Atlantic Conveyor was hit by an Exocet missile.
When we drove up, there was a chaplain from the Merchant Seamen's Mission in Manchester, sat in his car on the door, waiting for us on the road. And I saw his little blue badge on his lapel. And I thought, something's wrong. So he said, "Can I speak to you in the house, please?" So I said, "Yes, come on." So I said to the children, "Go in the kitchen, please," and sent them away in the kitchen. He took me in the lounge. He said, "I'm afraid I have some bad news for you." I said, "Just how bad?" He said, "I'm afraid it's the very worst." And then I couldn't get rid of the man. I just wanted him to go. And he said, "The children, make your mother a strong cup of tea." I can remember that. And they came in, they kept saying, "What's the matter?" I said, "Shh, be quiet, I'll see you later." And then he went, and then, of course, I told the children.
How did you tell them?
I just said that the ship had been hit and that the dad had been killed. And they sent me a duplicate map saying Frank Folks was buried at sea on Wednesday, the 26th of May. I got a plastic bag, and there was his pipe, his wristwatch, his St. Christopher, his wedding ring. I was very upset about them taking his wedding ring off because it worried me. It was very, very tight. He'd never taken it off. And I worried how they'd got it off his fingers. And he always used to wear a cap down below because he didn't like to get oil in his hair. And his cap was in this plastic bag, but they were all wet, still as they'd come out of the sea.
British forces digging in at St. Carlos were held up by the loss of vital equipment on the Atlantic Conveyor. But Julian Thompson was under pressure from London to get on with the war.
At the time, it was clear to me that back in England, there was a political need for a victory so that we could be seen to be doing something, seen to be winning.
I think there were many of us who were worried initially that having got a beachhead at San Carlos, we were going to get stuck there and not be able to break out of it. Because everybody has memories. There were memories of the time it took to break out of the beachhead in Normandy. And in terms of the whole of the Falklands, it wasn't a big area, but just to be stuck in a very small area and confined there would have had all sorts of troubles in every way, not least on the diplomatic front, because if we didn't get a move on, all the proposals for ceasefires would become stronger, and ceasefires which would have conditions which would not have been beneficial from our point of view, all those risks. So a breakout was very important.
Though you are quite happy, or though you don't mind, if you like, dying for your queen and country, you certainly don't contemplate dying for politicians. I was summoned often to the radio telephone to speak with the superior headquarters in Northwood. And on one particular occasion I can remember, after a particularly irritating telephone conversation, walking out of the tent and saying to myself in somewhat of a temper, "I shall win the war for these buggers and then I shall go."
On direct orders from London, the 2nd Parachute Battalion launched an attack on the Argentine stronghold at Goose Green.
It's dark. There's an enormous amount of noise. There's incoming fire to you. There's white phosphorus going off to provide smoke and illumination. There's tracer coming towards you and going away from you. There's fear running through you. You close up towards the trenches. You throw grenades. You fire your weapon. You bayonet. It's savage, gutter fighting. Everything you've ever experienced before is nothing like it. It is basic killing.
In command of 2 Para was Lieutenant Colonel H. Jones.
H. Jones was a warrior. He wasn't a peacetime soldier. He was single-minded. He was aggressive. He was determined, charismatic leader. Everybody knew that he was in charge.
The CO got on the radio to A Company and told them to get a grip and speed up and continue the movement, which they couldn't. So he said, I'm not having any of this, and decided to go up and join A Company. To say he got a little bit pear-shaped would be a slight understatement. When he made up his mind that a thing was going to be done, then it was going to be done. You don't actually get time to think. If the CO says you do something, then you do it. You might think bloody fool afterwards or during it, but you get out and do it. And the CO said, we're joining A Company and we're going over the top. So we joined A Company and we went over the top. Once we actually got down there, then we're in a slightly better position. But when I got there, behind the CO, he didn't stop, he kept running. So I thought, here we go. And all of a sudden, somebody behind me shouted out, watch out, there's a trench on the left. And I shouted to him to watch his back, because I could see what was going to happen. And he ignored me, or didn't hear me. I would think he actually ignored me, and charged up the hill to neutralise the trench that I was firing out. As he got to within 6 or 7 feet of that trench, he actually got shot from the trenches behind. You know, that you could actually see, and I saw the round striking the ground behind him, coming up, gradually getting towards him, and actually shot him in the back. And the impact of the rounds hitting him actually pushed him right on top of the trench that he was going for.
The signallers in his headquarters had prepared a phrase, sun rays down, so that I would know that something was wrong with him, which would be the key for me to step in to the breach. And in this confusion, over the radio came this cry, sun rays down. And I couldn't believe it. And I actually asked for verification. And Colour Sergeant Blackburn, his signaller, shouted again, sun ray is down, for Christ's sake. And then the surge of apprehension and fear and would I perform well enough? What do I do now? What's the situation up there? Ran through me.
You know, I was slightly numb in the fact that, you know, COs aren't supposed to die. And the actual implication of the commanding officer taking on an enemy position, frontal, was sort of comic book stuff that you read about and you don't really think that it should happen. I turned him over because he was lying on his back, got his webbing off and actually found the wounds. And at this stage he was still conscious, although slipping into unconsciousness. So I stayed there trying to keep him warm with extra windproofs and his own quilted jacket. And unfortunately, some time later, he died.
Lieutenant Colonel Jones, Captain Wood, Captain Dent, Lieutenant Barry, Corporal Hardman, Corporal Sullivan, Corporal Fryer.
next to the prisoner of war cage, which was the sheep pens, was actually a pile of ammunition that had to be moved, and we had a rough idea that it was booby-trapped. And we asked the Argentinians officers if they would move the ammunition for their own safety. So they detailed off some men to actually help move the ammunition, which was artillery shells and mortar ammunition. And they were moving it, and all of a sudden there was a bang, and there was a booby trap there. And the soldier involved, right next to the booby trap, was actually in a vacuum, flames and explosives. And the only thing that could be actually done for the soldier, because we couldn't get to him, was actually he was shot to take him out of his misery, because there was nothing humanly else to be done for him. And then I actually thought, I'm lucky. It was an eerie sort of silence, pitch dark, freezing. Then the mind just ran riot, and I felt tears trickling down the side of my face when I thought about good blokes that actually died that day, and the fact that more were likely to die tomorrow, you know, and a lump came in the throat. And I lay there for a good couple of hours, actually going through the events of the day.
Fridays at 9 come with a twist. Some find him clever.
This is more calculated and evil than we imagine. That's all magic is, it's an illusion.
Some find him charming.
I just can't watch people eating raw onions, it gives me indigestion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Some find him clueless.
How did I deceive you?
By telling me that you weren't interested in me in such a way that implied you were interested in me.
But he's always entertaining. Jonathan Creek, Fridays at 9 on UK TV Gold.
Evolution.
Welcome to Lind and the secrets of our master chocolatiers. Shortly before Easter, our sumptuous Lind chocolate takes on a very special form, with 2 long ears and a golden coat. When everything is perfect, our gold bunny gets its seal of approval, a little golden bell. So we can give you something perfect, a golden Easter. Lind, chocolate passion since 1845.
Closer. Exclusive. Peter and Jordan have moved in together. Plus, try Claire Sweeney's Weight Watchers diet. Get closer now.
You can't buy from a shop, it doesn't gather dust on a shelf. The right PC and printer at the right price comes direct from Dell. Call or go online and we'll build a PC just for you. Like this Dell Dimension desktop. It's got an Intel Pentium 4 processor. With over £100 off in our Easter sale, it's an amazing £499. This offer includes a Dell all-in-one printer, which can also scan and copy. You're not just getting a PC, you're getting a Dell. Easy as Dell.
Done. And that's it, thanks. There's a good boy. Off you go.
Gum disease affects 4 out of 5 dogs over 3. Fed daily, Pedigree Dentastic's unique X-shape can help reduce plaque and tartar buildup by up to 60%. You clean your teeth every day, so should your dog.
This is the classic 4-4-2 formation. The goalie, he kicks the ball up to the defender. They chip it up to the midfielder, who does a cheeky back heel to the forward, who pulls away from his marker, and he meets the ball with a diving header. Bang! That was the referee.
With 4 whole grain goodness, corn, oats, rice and wheat, Cheerios is perfect for your home team.
That's got to be a yellow card.
There's a whole lot of good in those little O's.
20% of the UK is officially obese. UK TV documentary. This is how we live.
In readiness for the advance on Stanley, reinforcements were brought into St. Carlos. To avoid a long march, the Welsh Guards were moved aboard the ship Sir Galahad. It set sail for a place called Bluff Cove. Due to bad weather, the Sir Galahad was diverted away from Bluff Cove into a small inlet called Fitzroy. Major Ewan Southby Taylor was horrified by the ship's arrival. Crammed full of troops in broad daylight, it was in grave danger of Argentine air attack. He wanted the men moved urgently off the ship to the safety of the shore, just 200 yards away.
And I put it to the senior officer that I could find on the stern of the Galahad that my considered and professional opinion as a land aircraft officer and somebody involved in amphibious warfare for almost all my career was that they should get off first and then wait. He was adamant that Bluff Cove was his destination and not Fitzroy. I was equally adamant that I was not going to take him to Bluff Cove in anything in daylight, and I was, of course, tragically proved correct only a few hours later when one of my craft was sunk. I pointed out that it was only 200 yards away. It would take maybe only 20 minutes to get all his men off. He said he wouldn't put his men in a mixed load of ammunition, which we had from Sir Tristram, but we had the boats alongside to take the men off. I explained to him that this is war. We don't operate to peacetime restrictions during war, and that the men were in grave danger. And I think that was probably the most serious and most often made point that I put across. And eventually, in a fit of extreme anger, I told him that he was behaving extremely irresponsibly and that I would not be held responsible for what happened to his men. And of course, tragically, 3 or 4 hours later, I was proved absolutely correct.
Bodies screaming, shouting, and the ship was one big fireball. There was nowhere for the flames to escape. They rebounded and came back and caught most of my back, my legs. And that's where I actually caught fire. And as I was trying to get out, I fell over. That's how I did my hands. It was red hot, the deck, as if the metal had been in a forge in a blacksmith's. To me, it was like as if I was seeing double. There was a hand, and the ripples, the skin off the hands had actually come off to the top here. And it was like a glove on top, and it was flapping about on both hands.
When I came round, I don't know how long, I couldn't have been out that long anyway. So all I could feel was a burning sensation on the lower part of my left leg. So I didn't think nothing of it, so I automatically tried to stand up, not thinking nothing of it. And I remember looking at my left hand because that's what I was more worried about because it melted. And when I stood up, my leg had gone. There was just little bits left of it.
As I was looking around, you could see other people that were injured, probably your mates, whatever, but you couldn't recognise them because of the blackness of the face, hair burnt. It's gone all black and it started bubbling and sort of scabbing up, and it smelt awful.
I was bleeding from the head, but there was nothing desperately wrong with me. And I knew where the door was, and I started thinking about getting myself out. And I tried to get up onto my knees, and the thickness of the smoke, which was layered, stopped me breathing straight away. So I had to go back down onto the floor. Unfortunately, I was in somebody else's remains and at that time. But I felt it, I couldn't see it. So I started making my way towards the exit, where I knew it was. And a chap from the back of the room, very, very muffled because of the smoke and the darkness, he started screaming that he'd lost his leg. And that was the biggest deciding point in my life, whether or not I was going to go and help him or get out. Nobody would have ever known, because it was just him and me left alive in the room. And I decided I wanted to be a hero. So I went back for him, and we were calling to each other through the darkness. And I was still desperately trying to talk myself into turning around and making my way to the exit. Anyway, I found Kevin Woodford by accident. I must have trodden on the stump of his leg, because the next thing I know, a fist came out of the darkness and clobbered me one. And Kevin was very, very obviously hysterical. I couldn't find my morphine or his morphine. Everything was confused for me. And we carried the morphine around our necks. It's called Omnipon. And he was a big man, and the only thing I could do was to put my arms underneath his arms and start dragging him along the floor in the direction of where I knew the exit was. Well, all the armchairs and settees had turned into barricades, and as he was so heavy and I couldn't lift him and I couldn't breathe as well because of the smoke, I was having to bulldoze my way through the barricades. And I very quickly lost all my strength. I was just losing control completely. And I got him about 3/4 of the way down the room when I whispered to him that I had to leave him and I was going to go and get help.
Casualties were airlifted to the British hospital ship Uganda. Chris White, suffering from shock and convinced he'd left a man below deck to die, tried to take his own life.
I noticed that they hadn't taken my Omnipon, my morphine ampule, off of me, which was affixed to my dog tags around my neck. So I administered the morphine to myself, into my chest, aiming for the heart. And I just moved my shirt over to one side and punched it in. But obviously the needle wasn't deep enough. And I was spaced out for a while. A little while after that, the padre came down. He'd heard about this particular person who kept on trying to do these silly things. And he'd also been talking to a young man up in intensive care who had had his leg taken off by the action on the Galahad. And he put two and two together, and he came down and took me to Kevin Woodford. And I couldn't recognize Kevin because, like I say, when I first met him, it was in the dark. We took one look at each other, burst into tears, and that was it.
most incredible feeling.
All the burns victims were treated together in a converted officers' mess on board Uganda.
There's this awful sort of stench of burning. And quite close by to the mess, there was a very tiny galley. And it smelled like somebody had burnt toast. I mean, you just sort of open the doors, and there was about 40 bears of black faces. And it was a feeling of horror, I suppose, and you just wanted to sort of close the doors and turn away and run. And then you thought, God, you've got to hide this horror you have on your face. And you just walked in and tried to smile and get on with your job.
I could have got those men off in 20 minutes. No question of that whatsoever. And anybody with any professional sense would have taken the advice of the on-the-spot expert, regardless of rank. But unfortunately, I was not wearing the rank of a lieutenant colonel, who, as far as I can make out, was the only man who was prepared to listen to him. And I think probably in my career that was the most angry I have ever been, although I was not directly involved. It was certainly the only time in my career that I have felt almost shame at being involved in something that has gone wrong. And although I blame myself partly for not insisting with even more vigor that the men were brought ashore, I feel that I am not actually to blame for the deaths of those men. And it gets through to me even now after 6 years, 5 years.
Real-life stories, crime Sundays, starting with the underworld and undercover cops. Sunday from 9 on UK TV People.
Have you ever wished you could watch just a little more quality television through your TV aerial? For $7.99 a month, Top Up TV boosts your current channel lineup with 10 of the most popular digital channels through your existing TV aerial and set-top box. Watch UK Gold, Discovery, E4 and many more. And best of all, you can pay on a month-to-month basis, which means there's no long-term contract, because you never know in life what's going to happen. Take advantage of our half-price online connection offer by subscribing now at topuptv.com, or for more info, call us on 08700 543210.
3 is definitely my winning number, and with MG Rover's 3 years of freedom offer, it can be yours too. Number 1, you get 3 years servicing. 2, you get 3 years warranty. And 3, you get 3 years roadside assistance on all these MGs and Rovers. 3 winning reasons why you should contact your MG Rover dealer. Call 08457 186 186.
It's kind of like an airbag.
An airbag?
Same at the airport, checking email. I drop my ThinkPad. It senses the drop. Hard drive braces for impact. Like an airbag.
So if I dropped it, it would just...
Brace for impact.
Oh, yeah?
That's not my notebook.
Check, please.
Klutz-proof wireless, only on a ThinkPad, with Intel Centrino mobile technology.
Nearly done. And that's it, thanks. There's a good boy. Off you go.
Gum disease affects 4 out of 5 dogs over 3. Fed daily, Pedigree Dentistics' unique X-shape can help reduce plaque and tartar build-up by up to 60%. You clean your teeth every day, so should your dog.
Norwich Union Direct? Yeah, that's right. My car. I'm told you can cook me happy. Yeah, it's a hatchback. Oh, fantastic!
I think she's happy.
I think so too.
Let Norwich Union Direct put a smile on your face. Call 0800 828 829 and let us quote you happy.
If you have an ITV or on-digital box, simply tune in and store new channels via your menu button to catch a special preview of Top Up TV now.
Naked Icons Month. Stripping Celebrity Bare, starting with Marilyn, Saturday from 8, exclusive to UK TV documentary.
The distance from St. Carlos to Stanley is 60 miles. British troops had to walk the whole way. This yomp was carried out in extremely harsh conditions, freezing temperatures, snow and driving rain.
Fresh water you couldn't get, so obviously, you take what you can, out of the ground, and we would sort of stamp onto the peat or dig holes until we got a puddle, because it was always sodden, the ground. Scoop the water in a mug and put some sterilising tablets in. Now, this water was absolutely black, but I mean, you drank it.
As the British troops closed in, the Argentine conscripts could only wait. Dug in on the mountains around Stanley, they prepared for the final battles.
In
In those last days, all we talked about was how many would die. 5, 10, 20. We felt this impotence. We were waiting for death, and there was nothing we could do about it. So you looked back at what you'd done in your life. But we were 19, so there's not much we could have done, really.
For the British, too, there was an anxious wait. Troops had to sit it out until the order to attack was given.
Nothing happened, and the tension was pretty sort of electric, and we were all moving an extended line, and still nothing happened, and we were just waiting. And after a while, people, you could almost feel almost a sense of relief. People were beginning to think, well, they've bugged out, they're not here anymore. And just as we were beginning to feel that, there was suddenly, literally, the horizon just lit up in a complete sort of sea of white flashes. That initial firefight was quite incredible. It was like being at the wrong end of a machine gun range. And the noise was incredible. And I think we were fairly stunned for a minute or two. And you really had the feeling that if you raised your hand, slightly in the air, it would be shot off.
Y cayó una granada y le pegó al pibe este y lo levantó en el aire.
A grenade exploded near us and lifted this soldier up in the air. There was shouting and screaming and explosions and bullets flying. Complete chaos. Anyway, he stood up and shouted, "I'm hit, I'm hit."
Me hirieron.
He was swearing and screaming at the top of his voice, but he could still walk. He turned to me and said, "Here, take my rifle." He handed over his ammunition to another soldier, and then he started shouting, "I'm leaving, I'm leaving." I suppose he meant it was over for him, that he'd had enough. This was all happening with the British troops right in front of us, very close by. It was all so crazy. It's hard to explain now. Anyway, he started walking away and they threw a phosphorus grenade at him. And he actually caught fire and started screaming. He was like a human torch, but what really bothered us was that he was lighting up our positions so that the enemy could see us. So we started waving him away. At that point, we didn't care whether he lived or died.
Well, you can always tell if you're close to someone when they've been hit, because you hear the crack of the bullet, but you also hear a sort of horrible sort of thwack as the bullet hits sort of solid flesh and bone, and it's pretty unpleasant. It's an extraordinary noise, I suppose. very grim, and you just, even if you've never heard that sort of thing before, you just instinctively know exactly what's happened. And one of my soldiers who had a night sight suddenly saw one of them. And we heard the crack, and we heard the thump as it hit the Argentinian. There was a moment's silence, and then there was most terrible screaming from this Argentinian. And he was screaming for his mother. And there was complete silence from both sides at this point, and both of us listened to it. And I'm sure we, in a way, were just as horrified as the Argentinians. It really was an awful noise. And it went on and on and on.
Terminé de cargar y me levanté. Y cuando me levanté,
I finished loading, and when I stood up, there was a British soldier right in front of me. By this time, they were all over us. And then he shot me. He shot me in the head. I felt as though I was falling backwards in slow motion. They must have thought I was dead. They just left me there. But in fact, the bullet hadn't hit the skull. It ran down my helmet and hit me in the back of the neck. And I thought, my God, I'm alive. I turned round, I don't know how, and started crawling back on all fours. I tried to stand up, but I couldn't. I reached the edge of the mountain, and I remember seeing the whole valley beneath me. It was like a vision of hell. The most terrifying sight I've ever seen. Explosions, fires, machine guns rattling, soldiers yelling and screaming. An inferno. I felt everything spinning around me. And when I tried to stand up, I fell down the slope.
Y cuando me paré, me caí.
They all thought I was dead. I was conscious, but I just couldn't move a single muscle. So they rolled me up in this blanket and put me on top of this pile of bodies. Later, a sergeant came along, jotting down the names of the dead soldiers. He was crying. He looked desperate. Well, it was such complete chaos, and he started talking to me, and I must have blinked, because suddenly he realized that I was still alive.
As we started going up the mountain and the enemy were just melting before us, we just went faster and faster until we got to the top. And in a way, we almost couldn't believe that we'd got to the top. And there, just 4 kilometers away or something, and clearly in view, was Stanley. We could see the lights, and I think for a second or two, we just sort of stood there looking at this with euphoria that, you know, we'd done it. And of course, that was fatal because at that moment, from 200 meters away, an Argentinian automatic weapon of some sort and several other weapons opened up on us. And in that initial sort of burst, which was almost a sort of ambush, really, 3 of us were hit. I saw the person in front of me just spin round, sort of pirouette round. He'd been hit in the hand, and the force just sort of literally knocked him spinning like a top. And there was a crack behind me, and someone had been hit behind me. And it all seemed to be in slow motion. In fact, it was just my brain thinking rather faster. But as I turned to run into the nearest cover myself, I suddenly felt something like enormous sort of hammer blows on my legs. And the tracer from the rounds was like sort of, you know, sort of scarlet rods all around me. And I noticed that my right leg especially, both my legs, but especially my right leg, was very sort of stiff already. And there was a sort of brief burning sensation through the muscle on my right arm. I put my right hand down to touch my leg, and 2 of my fingers went in up to the knuckles. And it was at that point that I realized I had actually been hit. The stretcher bearers found it very difficult to get into us. Eventually they did, and they started carrying us down. And then the next thing I knew was that I was lying a short distance from my stretcher, and there was complete silence. I never heard the blast or anything. Whether I'd been knocked unconscious for a short time, I don't know. I turned round, and the stretcher bearers basically were in pieces. At least one of them was completely blown to pieces. It really was wretched. I just couldn't believe it.
As the British moved on towards Stanley, Argentine dead were left scattered across the battlefield. Burying them was a gruesome task.
The first guy I came across, he he had all of this part of his face here was totally missing. And he had upper chest wound. And I took his dog tags out. And while I was doing it, I was talking all the time. I was going, okay, right, I'm just going to undo his dog tags and, right, yeah. Oh, here they come, yeah. Not because I was trying to tell the lads what I was doing. Obviously, I was just trying to stop myself from thinking about this guy. Everybody we came across was all twisted. You could see the agony, you know, that these guys had been in when they died. I mean, their legs were all twisted, their arms. And then we found an Argentine officer. He'd been injured. He had a belly wound. I can't remember who found him. And they called me over, said, oh, come on over here, Lou, and have a look at this guy here. And went over. And he was sort of, he started speaking to me in English. And he was telling me, you know, that he didn't know why he was, you know, why we were fighting either. I feel bad about the bodies, you know, the state of them and everything. And, you know, the way we sort of just toss them into a hole. Yeah, they were just kids. The guy that was injured, you know, I wish Nate that he'd never spoken English, like, you know, and he died. Can we stop a minute? It took me 4 years to cry about a few dead people. Because obviously you can't cry then. You know, you got a job to do and you do it. I still feel, even now I feel, you know, why am I crying? Or what? I'm afraid I just don't see him as enemy, you know.
How safe are our skies? Plane crash, an anatomy, all this week at 11, only on UK TV documentary.
Evolution. What's it like?
Welcome to Lind and the secrets of our master chocolatiers. Shortly before Easter, our sumptuous Lind chocolate takes on a very special form, with 2 long ears and a golden coat. When everything is perfect, our gold bunny gets its seal of approval, a little golden bell. So we can give you something perfect. A golden Easter. Lindt, chocolate passion since 1845.
You can't buy from a shop, it doesn't gather dust on a shelf. The right PC and printer at the right price comes direct from Dell. Call or go online and we'll build a PC just for you. Like this Dell Dimension desktop. It's got an Intel Pentium 4 processor. With over £100 off in our Easter sale, it's an amazing £499. This offer includes a Dell all-in-one printer, which can also scan and copy. You're not just getting a PC, you're getting a Dell. Easy as Dell.
This is more calculated and evil than we imagined. That's all magic is, it's an illusion.
Jonathan Creek, Fridays at 9 on UK TV Gold.
Entonces, hay una toma de conciencia de que ya
we realized that it was pointless to carry on. We had no more cards to play.
reducida apenas a 10 o 12 piezas.
Our artillery was down to about 10 or 12 guns.
Apoyo aéreo directo.
We had no air support.
Los ingleses
The
mantenían
British were just off our shores, shelling us.
para reforzar sus propios fuegos.
Our men were exhausted. They had fought hard and had lost much of their equipment. If we'd carried on, we would have just have been wasting lives.
De más vidas, que era inútil.
That is the conclusion I reached.
Esa fue la conclusión.
So then I discussed it with the High Command before accepting the British offer of a ceasefire and the start of negotiations.
Resolví aceptar el cese del fuego ofrecido por los ingleses y más tarde se produjeron las conversaciones correspondientes.
Yo sentí una congoja muy grande. Para mí era...
It really hurt. We had been defeated and I felt defeated. What really stuck in my mind was seeing the Union Jack flying after the surrender. That was quite a blow. I was so angry and frustrated that I broke down in tears. I remember thinking about all I had been through. The hunger and the cold, loneliness, and the death of so many of my friends. And after all that, there was the British flag flying over us. It was unbearable.
As I walked around the corner and actually Stanley came into view, I thought, bloody hell, was it all worth it? It was smelly, dirty, and it just wasn't my idea of what Stanley was going to be.
The whole place was chaotic, with guns and ammunition lying about, the odd dead body. Every other building seemed to have a red cross on it, and there was the smell, which is unmistakable, of death. And we eventually went to the top floor of a little house which we requisitioned, which we shared with one of the companies of 2 Para. And during the night, we turned on one of our radios to the BBC World Service, and we heard about the surrender from the BBC 8,000 miles away, which was being conducted in a building 800 yards from where I was sitting. and we all felt the most enormous sense of relief. And my main feeling was that no more young men were going to have to die. It was not like winning a football match or anything like that. It was just an enormous sense of relief that it was over, we could all go home.
We sailed in early that morning. Everywhere that you looked was small boats packed with people to cheer us in. And it was a brilliant feeling, really, because, you know, it did make it then seem worthwhile.
Just upset you. You felt very bitter towards the people that were coming back, not as individuals, just because they'd all come back and Frank hadn't.
Great, wonderful! Oh, you're wonderful! Oh.
Though on the surface there seemed to be a lot of razzmatazz, Homecoming in many aspects was fairly subdued as a personal experience for many of us. There was a feeling that we didn't want to leave the environment in which we had spent so long, among our own comrades, amongst our friends, people we knew, and go into a world which was full of people who didn't know what we'd gone through, who were perhaps putting the wrong connotation on what had happened, who were perhaps reveling in the fact of victory for the wrong reasons. And I actually, in some ways, felt somewhat reluctant to walk down the brow of that ship in amongst it all.
Returning to Buenos Aires, conscripts found that life seemed to go on much the same as before the war.
Entonces fuimos a un boliche, como le decimos nosotros, a una boate.
I remember we went out to this bar and I walked in and I thought, well, this can't be a very happy place after all that's been going on. I went up to the bar and I ordered a beer. And I looked around me and the place was full of happy faces. Everyone was having a good time, celebrating as though we'd just won the World Cup. You'd think that nothing had happened in Argentina.
No había nada, no había pasado nada. Acá en la Argentina nunca pasó nada. Entonces uno se pregunta.
And I asked myself, how many fathers did I kill? What was the point? Did I do all this for my country? What's my country? Are you my country? All those of you laughing and dancing and having a good time while we suffer? It's not resentment. I'm not asking for any reward. All I'm saying is, look, we risked our lives at 19. Many didn't come back. But we did. What are we supposed to do now?
Nosotros estamos acá y ahora qué hacemos.
I asked to go down to the South Sea and drive along the seafront before we finally returned to our home. And as I drove along the front there, people were having their summer holidays. They were eating their ice creams, they were sitting in their deck chairs, and they were generally passing the time of day, enjoying themselves. And I felt as if I wanted to pick them up and shake them and say, look, there is a war going on. People are getting killed. And somehow I felt for them that the war was something that happened at 8 o'clock in the morning when they picked up their newspapers or switched on the radio, or at 9 o'clock at night when the TV news came on.
I didn't go home for the first sort of few days. I didn't like all the flag waving. Strangers would come up and say something stupid like, did you kill anybody, you know? Or they'd be slapping you on the back and buying you pints. And you go along with it a bit, yeah, I was down there and all that lot. But you never really tell them what it was like, you just tell them, well, basically what, as much as the British public do know.
I don't think there are any best moments. The whole affair is one of tragedy. War is a messy, dirty, miserable business. And we should never, ever allow ourselves to go to war.
We, the British people, are proud of what has been done. Proud of these heroic pages in our island story. Proud to be here today to salute the task force. Proud to be British.
We went to fight because they had invaded British territory. And it's really all a question of pride. And I think Britain had to have that pride in herself. Or as a nation, we would have just...
At Dover Castle, looking out to the French coast, naval staff began to plan for the evacuation of British troops. At French High Command, there was a change of leadership and talk of a change in strategy.
There was a possibility, and all